My secret million-dollar move was not just a plan. It was a testament to patience, foresight, and a profound understanding of human nature, particularly Brenna's insatiable avarice. The crisp, white tablecloth stretched between us, a stark, almost clinical barrier, yet it felt as if an ocean lay between my experience and theirs. Across it, Brenna smiled, that practiced, saccharine curve of her lips that I had once found utterly enchanting, but which I now recognized as a chilling precursor to her calculated manipulations. Her hand, adorned with the blinding new diamond ring Alaric must have bought her, rested casually next to the stack of divorce papers, a gesture of ownership over a future she believed was entirely her creation and my ruin. The air in this ridiculously expensive restaurant, a place she had chosen to maximize her perceived triumph, felt thick, almost suffocating with her smugness. "Silas," she began, her voice a purr, dripping with a false sweetness that scraped against my ears. "I truly hope you understand. This is for the best. We were simply on different paths, weren't we? You were always so content with mediocrity. So slow." She paused then, letting her gaze sweep over me, lingering on my perfectly ordinary suit, as if confirming my utter insignificance, my inability to keep up with her soaring ambition. "And now, with everything liquidated, the joint accounts, well, there's not much left, is there? I've taken care of my share, of course, ensuring my future is secure." The words were a thinly veiled declaration of victory, a final twist of the knife she imagined she had plunged into my heart. Alaric Finch, her new partner and my former client's CEO, sat beside her, radiating an obnoxious, almost vulgar confidence. He chuckled then, a low, guttural sound that grated on my ears, a sound I had come to associate with his self-serving opportunism. "Some people just aren't cut out for the fast lane, Silas," he chimed in, his eyes glinting with a smug satisfaction that suggested he was already counting his winnings, both financial and relational. He saw me as a relic, a weak competitor, easily discarded. "It's a tough world out there, you know. Only the strong survive, and the fast adapt." Brenna's smile widened, a triumphant flash that exposed her true nature. "Yes, Alaric is right. I need someone who understands ambition, who can provide for the life I deserve, not someone who sits on their hands waiting for pennies to drop. This is my fresh start, Silas. You'll be fine. You're a smart man. You'll figure something out." Her patronizing tone was a final insult, a dismissive flick of the wrist. She believed she was offering me crumbs from her lavish feast, a gesture of charity from on high. A silence descended then, heavy with their perceived victory, a thick, oppressive quiet. Their eyes, bright with condescension, dared me to react, to crumble, to show the despair they so clearly expected to see etched across my face. They wanted to witness my brokenness, to revel in the wreckage of my supposed financial and emotional ruin. But I simply met their gazes, my own expression calm, almost serene, betraying nothing of the intricate machinery whirring beneath the surface. Inside, a quiet, almost mischievous amusement stirred. They believed they had left me utterly destitute, stripped bare, ruin staring me in the face like a gaping maw. They had seen only the surface, the visible layers of a meticulously constructed financial edifice, a shell designed to mislead. What they couldn't possibly fathom was the bedrock beneath, the hidden vault, the long-term play I had cultivated, nurtured, and insulated for years, patiently waiting for this precise moment. My secret million-dollar move was not just a plan. It was a testament to patience, foresight, and a profound understanding of human nature, particularly Brenna's insatiable avarice. They saw an empty shell, a depleted account. I saw a perfectly executed setup, the final pieces of an elaborate puzzle clicking into place with a satisfying, silent precision. Their victory was nothing more than an illusion, meticulously crafted for their consumption. To truly comprehend that moment, that quiet, internal smile, you must understand the journey that led me there, the painstaking accumulation of foresight and strategic silence. My name is Silas Thorne, and at 38, I was a senior software engineer, a profession that suited my methodical, analytical mind perfectly. I've always been someone who looks 10 steps ahead, not just one, anticipating outcomes, mapping contingencies. It's a trait that served me well in complex system architecture, dissecting potential vulnerabilities and building robust solutions, and even better in life itself, though few ever realized it. When I met Brenna, she was a whirlwind of charm and vivacity, a magnetic force that pulled me in. She was captivating in her ambition, or what I initially perceived as such. I saw potential, a spark, and perhaps, with a touch of naive optimism, I believed my steady presence, my grounded nature, could help temper her more impulsive tendencies, guiding us both towards a stable, prosperous future. Our early years together were a blend of shared aspirations, or so I thought. I worked diligently, pouring my efforts into my career, always ensuring a significant portion of my income went into our joint savings and investments. I believed in steady growth, in the power of diversified portfolios, in the magic of compound interest. It was a patient approach, one that required discipline and delayed gratification, but one that promised substantial, genuine long-term security. Brenna, however, clearly viewed my patience as a weakness, my methodical nature as a lamentable lack of drive. She craved immediate gratification, the instant flash of luxury, the flashy car, the designer bags, the extravagant vacations, even when our responsible savings plan dictated a more cautious approach. She saw the immediate, I saw the enduring. The cracks in our foundation began to show, not subtly, but with increasing clarity, as her impatience grew. Silas, why are we still living like this? Your colleagues are buying bigger houses, driving sports cars. When will our turn come? She'd often demand, her voice laced with a frustration I couldn't quite comprehend, a palpable irritation at my quiet determination. I tried to explain the long game, the crucial difference between fleeting status symbols and genuine financial freedom, but her eyes would glaze over, her attention drifting away. She saw only the present, the immediate desires unfulfilled, a constant yearning for what others possessed. My explanations of future security fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the siren song of instant luxury. My sacrifices were not just financial, they were personal, too. I often took on extra projects, worked late nights, forgoing personal hobbies, social gatherings, even much-needed rest, all to build a strong, unshakable foundation for our future. I envisioned a life where we were truly free, unburdened by debt or the whims of a volatile market, a life built on solid ground. Brenna, meanwhile, became increasingly entangled in her corporate world, particularly with her boss, Alaric Finch. Alaric was everything I wasn't: flashy, loud, ostentatiously wealthy, seemingly effortlessly so. He spent money like water, threw lavish parties, and cultivated an image of success that Brenna found utterly irresistible, a moth drawn to a dazzling, dangerous flame. He was the antithesis of my quiet, calculated approach, and I watched, silently, as she was drawn deeper into his orbit. It was during this period of growing disillusionment, this slow, painful erosion of trust, that my secret weapon began to take shape, not as an act of malice, but as a strategic defense. I had always diversified our joint assets, but as Brenna's materialism intensified, as her disdain for my patient approach became more apparent, a quiet, analytical alarm began to ring in my mind. I started contemplating contingencies, not just for financial downturns or market volatility, but for something far more personal: betrayal. My million-dollar move, which I internally dubbed Project Chimera, wasn't born out of malicious intent, but out of necessity and profound foresight. It was a highly complex, long-term investment strategy entirely separate from our joint finances, conceived as an ultimate safeguard. It began years ago, even before the affair, when I identified an emerging technology in quantum computing and AI systems that I deeply believed would redefine entire industries, shaking the very foundations of the tech world. Using my expertise as a software engineer, I dove deep into the underlying algorithms, the projected market impact, and the key players in this nascent field. I located a small, unassuming startup, still in its precarious seed funding stage, with a brilliant team of engineers whose genius was largely underestimated by the mainstream investment community. Their core concept was nothing short of revolutionary, but it required immense patience, a profound understanding of its technical complexities, and an ability to see beyond the immediate horizon to truly appreciate its monumental potential. Most investors overlooked them, preferring quicker, more tangible, less risky returns. But I saw the future. I knew their quiet brilliance would one day explode onto the global stage. Over the next few years, with meticulous precision, I funneled a consistent portion of my personal income Brenna believed was subsumed by our joint expenses or directed towards mundane responsibilities she never bothered to scrutinize, into this singular, high-conviction investment. I set up entirely separate banking channels, offshore accounts, and blind trusts that would make it virtually invisible to anyone not actively looking for it, and even then, incredibly difficult to trace back to me. Every transaction was layered, every communication encrypted with the same meticulous care I applied to my most sensitive software projects. It was a digital fortress, designed to be impervious to external interference, a safeguard against any unforeseen event, including the increasingly likely possibility of our marriage dissolving. I used my advanced software skills to build automated monitoring systems, ensuring I was always apprised of its progress, its subtle shifts, without ever exposing its existence. Brenna had no idea. She never asked for detailed breakdowns of my solo spending beyond what was needed for taxes. She was too focused on the perceived lack of immediate luxury in our shared life, too consumed by her own desires, to notice the quiet, powerful storm brewing just beneath the surface. She simply assumed all my earnings flowed into our pot, which, in her mind, was never full enough, never providing the instant gratification she craved. Project Chimera was my quiet rebellion, my strategic masterpiece, diligently cultivated in the shadows. It was a testament to my belief in true, long-term value, built brick by painstaking brick, while Brenna chased superficial gains and instant gratification. And by the time she openly began her affair with Alaric, her thinly veiled demands morphing into outright contempt, Project Chimera was not merely a concept or a distant dream. It was a rapidly accelerating reality, on the cusp of a truly monumental payoff. The irony was not lost on me. The very moment she believed she was escaping my mediocrity was the moment my true power was about to be revealed. As Brenna's fascination with Alaric intensified, evolving from a professional admiration into something far more intimate, and as her subtle hints about needing more grew louder, shifting into outright, impatient demands, I observed, I analyzed. And I continued to lay the groundwork for my contingency. She began to speak of her boss with an almost reverent tone, describing his lavish lifestyle, his expansive estate, his private jet, painting him as the epitome of success she so desperately craved. It became painfully clear that she wasn't just enamored with Alaric as a person, she was utterly captivated by the idea of Alaric, the gleaming symbol of instant wealth and status. And she saw me, with my steady, responsible investments, my methodical planning, as an irksome obstacle to that desired future. She saw my patience as an anchor, holding her back. During this period, I subtly shifted my focus. I continued to contribute to our joint accounts, maintaining the facade of our shared financial journey, a quiet deception designed to lull her into a false sense of security. But I ensured that nothing truly critical, nothing that would matter in the long run, remained vulnerable within those shared accounts. I systematically moved funds that were not actively invested in long-term, illiquid assets into more liquid, but easily retrievable, channels entirely under my control. I made sure that the primary access points for our joint investments remained within her perceived reach, allowing her to believe she had complete oversight and control, that she was truly in charge of our shared financial destiny. It was a calculated risk, a deliberate show of vulnerability, an invitation for her to overplay her hand. Brenna, interpreting my quiet demeanor and continued financial contributions as weakness, or perhaps even resignation, grew bolder, her confidence inflating with every perceived victory. She started to make larger, seemingly impulsive withdrawals from our joint savings, justifying them as necessary expenditures or urgent investments she was pursuing with Alaric's guidance. I didn't object. I simply watched the patterns, logging every transaction mentally, confirming my long-held suspicions about her true priorities, self-enrichment at any cost. Her arrogance swelled, inflating with each successful withdrawal she believed went unnoticed or unopposed. She saw my silence as an admission of defeat, a tacit acceptance of her increasing control over our shared finances, a sign that I had given up. "You're so passive, Silas," she'd scoff, after making another significant transfer, a sneer on her lips. "Sometimes I wonder if you even care about money." Little did she know, I cared about it deeply, but in ways she could never comprehend, in ways that transcended her materialistic desires. Alaric, meanwhile, reinforced her misguided confidence, a snake whispering poison into her ear. I heard snippets of their conversations, overheard on speakerphone or during Brenna's increasingly infrequent visits home, their voices dripping with shared conspiracy. "Brenna, you're too good for that slow pace. You need to be aggressive. Take what's yours." He was the predator, enticing her, shaping her into a mirror of his own avarice, and she was the willing, eager recipient of his toxic advice. I could almost hear the rustle of papers as she signed away funds, believing she was securing her glamorous future while simultaneously, unwittingly, dismantling mine. She believed she was plundering my treasure, but she was only touching the decoy. All the while, Project Chimera continued its silent, exponential climb. The small startup I had invested in years ago, a company dismissed by others as too niche, too complex, was now on the cusp of a monumental IPO, its quantum computing and AI technology revolutionizing several key industries, reshaping the very landscape of global commerce. News reports, still speculative enough to the casual observer, thrilled me with their understated predictions of its potential impact. I knew the true value, the real potential, the hidden depths. My automated monitoring systems were flashing green, signaling the perfect storm of market conditions and technological breakthroughs, the precise moment for the grand reveal. The timing, ironically, was aligning perfectly with Brenna's accelerated path to what she thought was financial liberation through Alaric. She was draining our accounts, believing she was leaving me with nothing but dust, believing she had stripped me bare. She was emptying the small pond, completely unaware that an ocean, filled with a fortune she could only dream of, a fortune that dwarfed her wildest fantasies, was about to surge from the depths I had meticulously prepared. My patience wasn't passive. It was a potent weapon, honed and sharpened over years of quiet observation and strategic action. And its blade was about to fall, swift and precise. The climax arrived not in a dramatic courtroom full of spectators, but in the cold, sterile elegance of a high-end private mediation room. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Brenna had formally served me with divorce papers, a day that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of a truly unexpected one. She arrived with Alaric, both dressed impeccably, their smiles bright and condescending, already radiating a misplaced sense of triumph. Our 2 lawyers sat across from each other, legal pads open, ready for battle. Brenna's lawyer, a formidable woman named Ms. Davies, began with a practiced air of sympathy that barely masked her eagerness to secure a quick, favorable outcome for her client, an easy win. "Mr. Thorne," Ms. Davies began, her voice smooth, perfectly modulated, "my client, Mrs. Thorne, has provided a comprehensive accounting of your joint assets. As you know, the majority of your liquid assets have been reallocated for her future needs. Given the unfortunate circumstances and her significant contributions to the household over the years, we propose a clean break. Mrs. Thorne will keep the remaining accessible funds, and in exchange, you retain your personal effects and a small, symbolic sum to avoid prolonged litigation." She gestured to a document on the table, a summary of our accounts showing a near-empty ledger from my side, a landscape of financial desolation designed to intimidate. Brenna leaned forward then, a look of faux concern on her face, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Silas, it's truly for the best. I've been upfront about everything. You wouldn't want a messy divorce, would you? This way, you can just move on." Her voice was still cloyingly sweet, but there was an underlying current of impatience. Alaric nodded in agreement, his arm draped casually over her chair, like a king surveying his conquered territory, completely oblivious to the trap he was about to fall into. My own lawyer, Mr. Chun, a quiet but incredibly astute man I had chosen specifically for his discretion and strategic mind, looked at me, a subtle question in his eyes. He knew. I gave him an imperceptible nod. The time had come. The long game was finally coming to its thrilling conclusion. "Ms. Davies," I began, my voice calm, cutting through the room's tense, expectant silence with unexpected clarity. "I appreciate your client's transparency, though I believe her definition of comprehensive may be incomplete. Brenna, you are quite correct. You have indeed reallocated what you believe to be the entirety of our joint assets and accessible investments. and I have allowed you to do so." The last sentence hung in the air, a quiet accusation, a puzzle piece that shifted the entire picture. Brenna's smile wavered then, her composure cracking. Alaric looked annoyed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "What exactly is he implying, Silas?" she snapped, her voice losing its composed, saccharine edge, a hint of genuine agitation creeping in. "I am implying nothing, Brenna," I corrected gently, my gaze steady on hers. "I am stating fact. You see, while you were focused on the visible, on what you could immediately grasp and spend, on the low-hanging fruit, I was focused on cultivating something far more substantial, far more enduring, and entirely beyond your reach. You emptied the public vault, not realizing I had built a personal treasury, a fortress of unseen wealth. I then turned to Mr. Chen. If you please, Mr. Chen, the documents." Mr. Chen, with a slight, knowing smile that was almost imperceptible, pulled out a thick binder from his briefcase and slid it across the table with a soft thud. "These are the updated financial statements, along with the recent public filings and a letter of intent from a major investment bank regarding an upcoming IPO. He handed a copy to Ms. Davies, whose professional curiosity had clearly been piqued, and then one to Brenna and Alaric, who took them with a mixture of confusion and growing apprehension. Brenna, initially dismissive, picked up the document with a casual air. Her eyes scanned the first page, her brow furrowed in mild confusion, then widened in sudden, absolute disbelief. She flipped through the pages, her breath catching audibly in her throat, a small, ragged gasp. The document detailed my long-term investment, Project Chimera, a significant, controlling stake in a groundbreaking quantum computing and AI startup named EMPTIED. It showed the initial capital, the strategic milestones achieved over years of quiet work, and crucially, the current valuation. The IPO was slated for next quarter, projected to be one of the largest tech offerings of the decade, a true market disruptor. The numbers on the page weren't in the thousands, or even hundreds of thousands. They were in the low nine figures. Millions. Many, many millions. A fortune beyond her wildest, most materialistic dreams. Alaric, peering over her shoulder with an air of superior knowledge, snatched the document from her trembling hands. His face, initially creased with irritation, went utterly slack as he read. His eyes darted frantically from the pages to my calm, unwavering face, then back to the dizzying figures, his jaw dropping in a silent, comical display of pure shock. "EMPTIED," he whispered, incredulous, the name escaping his lips like a foreign word. "But that's one of the hottest pre-IPO tech companies right now. Everyone's talking about them. They're valued at. Are you serious? This is your stake? Your personal investment all this time?" His voice was a strained whisper filled with a dawning horror. I simply nodded, maintaining my serene expression. "It has been for years. A long-term play. Something cultivated diligently for true financial independence, not just fleeting luxury. A project I nurtured quietly, patiently." I looked directly at Brenna, her face a mask of shock, disbelief, and a dawning, hideous horror, a masterpiece of shattered triumph. "While you were busy draining a few $100,000 from our joint accounts, believing it was everything, believing you had left me with nothing but dust, Project Chimera was quietly becoming worth over $100 million. And it's entirely mine. Cultivated and secured long before any discussion of divorce, completely separate from our joint finances, and impervious to any of your maneuvers or Alaric's advice." The room fell silent once more, a profound, heavy quiet, save for Brenna's ragged, broken gasp. Her face, utterly devoid of color, was a masterpiece of shattered triumph, every line etched with the realization of her catastrophic miscalculation. Alaric, usually so composed, so smug, looked utterly mortified, a vein throbbing visibly in his temple, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. The look he shot Brenna was not one of support, or even shared shock, but of utter, scathing contempt, a raw fury that exposed the brittle foundation of their relationship. In that singular, devastating moment, the power dynamic in the room, and irrevocably in their relationship, violently shifted. Brenna's carefully constructed empire of deceit had not just crumbled, it had been vaporized by a quiet, devastating truth she had never seen coming, a truth I had patiently waited to unleash. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening, a vacuum where Brenna's triumphant laughter had once echoed. Her carefully constructed facade, the one she had meticulously built over years, shattered into 1,000 pieces, leaving behind a raw, exposed panic. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, darted frantically between me, the incriminating documents, and Alaric, searching desperately for a lifeline, a shred of hope that simply wasn't there. No, she whimpered, her voice barely a whisper, a stark, pathetic contrast to her earlier confident pronouncements. No, that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You're just a software engineer. You always said we had to be careful, patient. This is a lie. You're lying. She lunged across the table then, snatching the papers, her hands trembling violently, crumpling the pristine financial report as if she could physically erase the devastating numbers, willing them out of existence. Her denial was absolute, a desperate attempt to cling to her shattered reality. Alaric, however, had gone beyond mere shock. He had transitioned from smug complacency to absolute apoplexy. His face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson, a stark, furious contrast to Brenna's deathly pallor. "Brenna, what have you done?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous, laced with pure, unadulterated rage. "Are you telling me you actually believe this? This loser was destitute? You abandoned this for me? For what? A few measly accounts you emptied? Do you know what Ether Dynamics is worth? Do you know how many deals I've been trying to get with them for my company? Their IPO is the talk of the entire tech world. You blind, idiotic woman, you just cost me more than you could possibly imagine." He was no longer looking at me as a rival, but as an infuriatingly clever obstacle, a man who had profoundly outsmarted him. And at Brenna, he looked with a mixture of betrayal and utter, scathing disgust. His ambitious, materialistic partner, the woman he believed would elevate him, had just cost him far more than he could fathom, both professionally and personally, by her abject foolishness. Miss Davies, Brenna's lawyer, looked equally stunned, her professional composure finally cracking under the immense pressure of the revelation. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She stammered, "Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, if these documents are indeed accurate, this completely changes the scope of our discussions. Your client's legal position is significantly altered, severely compromised. The implications of Brenna emptying the joint accounts, while I possessed such immense, separate wealth, suddenly made her appear not as a wronged wife seeking justice, but as a deceitful, opportunistic individual who had severely miscalculated, attempting to commit financial fraud. Her initial claims of needing financial support and her attempts to paint me as impoverished were now entirely undermined, exposed as a pathetic, grasping lie. I simply watched, my expression unchanging, calm in the face of their disintegration. I felt no wild triumph, no burning anger, only a quiet, profound sense of vindication. Brenna's immediate collapse was entirely predictable. She had always valued surface-level appearances and quick gains. The idea of long-term, hidden wealth, cultivated through patience and strategic thinking, was utterly beyond her comprehension. Its sudden, irrefutable exposure had pulled the rug from under her entire worldview, revealing the emptiness beneath her materialistic desires. Alaric, perhaps realizing the gravity of the situation, the immense professional embarrassment and financial opportunities he had just lost, pushed away from the table with a violent shove, his chair scraping loudly across the polished floor. I have to make a call," he mumbled, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation, a man utterly defeated. He stormed out of the room, leaving Brenna alone, visibly crumbling, abandoned by the very man she had sacrificed everything for. The golden parachute she had so eagerly grasped had turned into lead, dragging her down. Brenna finally slumped back in her chair, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. The tears came then, not tears of genuine remorse, not tears for what she had lost in terms of a relationship, but tears of bitter, self-pitying regret for the fortune she had unknowingly thrown away. "Silas," she choked out, her voice now pleading, desperate, utterly devoid of its earlier venom. "Please, I didn't know. I swear, I had no idea. We can fix this, right? We can still be a team. Imagine what we could do with that kind of money, together." Her words were a pathetic testament to her true motivations, still fixated on the wealth, on the shimmering allure of the money, not on the trust she had shattered, the damage she had inflicted, or the betrayal that had irrevocably poisoned our past. She wanted the money, not me. I simply shook my head, a final, definitive gesture. "Brenna, you made your choices. You consistently prioritized immediate gratification and superficial gains over patience, trust, and genuine partnership. You saw my methodical nature as a flaw, my quiet planning as a sign of weakness. You believed my silence was ignorance, my calm a sign of defeat. You were profoundly wrong. This isn't about money anymore, not for me. It's about integrity, something you evidently valued very little. And that, Brenna, is something you can never buy back, no matter how many millions you might have wanted. The fallout in that room was immediate and absolute. Brenna's grand exit, her calculated departure, had become her spectacular, self-engineered downfall. Alaric, her supposed savior, her knight in shining armor, had abandoned her in disgust, repulsed by her colossal misjudgment and the profound professional embarrassment she had unwittingly caused him. Her lawyer, Ms. Davies, now facing a completely different legal landscape, looked at Brenna with a dawning realization of the impossible battle ahead, a battle already lost. And I, who she believed she had left with nothing, stood quietly, the true winner of a game she never even knew was being played, a game she had lost before it even began. Months have passed since that devastating day in the mediation room, a day that reshaped not only my life, but the trajectory of many others caught in its wake. The divorce was finalized swiftly and as quietly as possible, given the explosive circumstances. Brenna received a fraction of what she had initially demanded, the bare minimum required by law, largely due to her demonstrable efforts to liquidate and appropriate joint assets under false pretenses. The public exposure of her gross miscalculation, particularly within the elite circles she so desperately craved to impress and enter, ensured that Alaric Finch kept a significant distance, severing all ties. His reputation, too, took a notable hit, not because he was financially ruined, but because his judgment in both business and personal matters was now openly, irrevocably questioned. Last I heard, Brenna was struggling to find a new footing, her dreams of lavish living replaced by the harsh, unyielding reality of her own poor choices and impulsive actions. She had chased a mirage and found herself stranded in a desert. My life, however, has taken a profoundly different trajectory, one of